seen that a solar tower in the Northern Cape is scorching birds, and it's according to ecologist HP van Heerden. In a recent newspaper article, he says that Africa's first concentrated solar power plant is injuring birds in its 800 degrees Celsius beam of heat as they fly into its mirrors. The tower at the Khi Solar One, which has been in full operation for 4 years now, contains boiling tubes with water from the Orange River pumped into them at a very high pressure. Now, to chat a little bit more about this, I'm joined by Birds and Renewable Energy Project Manager Samantha Ralston-Paton. Well, Samantha, very good morning to you. Thank you very much for joining us here on Weekend Dawn. I mean, just honing in on the Northern Cape and perhaps looking at the natural heritage that is available in the area. I mean, paint that picture for us.
Right. Well, I must admit I'm not an expert on the Northern Cape. But for me, what the Northern Cape means is wide open, beautiful spaces, untouched nature, and there's really something for everybody there. So for the bird fanatics, there's little small larks that are found nowhere else in the world. People who like more charismatic birds, there's the incredible Comforts Dam where you can find thousands of flamingos. Amazing botanical diversity, incredible Orange River, Richtersveld, the Grabie's Falls. You could probably do an entire program on the Northern Cape's natural diversity.
Samantha, based on that, I mean, outline how projects such as the Khi Solar One perhaps then cause a crisis of either endangerment, extinction, or perhaps even upsets to the biodiversity within the area.
Well, I think it's really important that we keep perspective on this. So this project has resulted in the death of literally hundreds of birds. But the good news is that very few of those birds are threatened. And most of them are actually quite common. So there's certainly environmental concerns about the project. Let's get that right. But the really exciting thing is, for the first time in South Africa and almost in the world, we have published data on what's actually happening there. And when you put the impacts of this facility in context of the impacts of global climate change, we really shouldn't be getting too upset about what's happening there. I think the key is that we're monitoring, we're learning about this new technology, and we have the opportunity to continually improve what's happening there and what will happen at new facilities in South Africa.
All right, so as we translate that published data, I mean, just looking at some of the agreements that have been and policies that have been put in place, looking at the Paris Accord Agreement and even the 2030 Agenda on Sustainable Development at large. I mean, explain how a system of protected areas and even policies such as these, as well as ongoing environmental impact assessments, are essential to the preservation of biodiversity within that area.
I think it's important for the public to understand that our protected areas are vital, but they are never going to be enough to protect the biodiversity, to protect nature that's out there. So the nature that's on our doorstep is as important. And that's where policies and legislation, for example, projects like Khi One need to go through a rigorous environmental impact assessment process, where they are required to predict and mitigate and minimize the impacts of those facilities. It's really important that new developments happen in a way that is sensitive to our natural environment.
It is an ecosystem, and we all literally cohabit together. I mean, in what ways is biodiversity then relevant to not only the natural and wildlife, but also poor people within the area? How do they coexist?
That is such an important question, and so often biodiversity is framed in a way that it's people or biodiversity, people or nature. But actually, it's both. And there's so many different ways that biodiversity benefits people. I think that one of the most pertinent ways is that if we have healthy ecosystems, they are more resilient and they help improve poor people and people's resilience against the impacts of climate change. So that the impacts of extreme weather events, flooding, for example. If we have healthy, intact ecosystems, we're much more likely to be able to respond to those changes that we're going to be seeing in the future. Then we can look at things like tourism. Both local and international people flock to South Africa to see our incredible biodiversity, and it's one of the most important part of our economies. And I think going forward, as we recover from the COVID crisis, our natural environments are going to become more and more important as we seek recreation and solace in nature.
Sam, I just want to conclude this conversation by just perhaps outlining the roles of government and non-governmental organizations, including scientists and citizens in general. I mean, ultimately, how are we all playing a role in conserving the natural elements in this biodiverse chain?
Yes, we all do play a really important role. I think sometimes people are very quick to criticize government for not doing enough. NGOs' role is to really support government and help give them their tools and also keep them on their toes to make sure that they are making sound decisions. One of my jobs is to really make sure that those lines of communication between the scientists who are giving us information to make sound decisions is fed back into government, into policies, so we're making evidence-based decisions. And the role of people, we need to be raising our voices and saying what's important to us. And to a lot of people, having healthy environments is really important. A lot of work is done by citizen scientists, so people who go out and monitor just simply because they enjoy doing that. That information is then fed into science, fed into policy. So we all have a really important role to play.
And I mean, as Heritage Month culminates, it's interesting to see how we can preserve those ecosystems that you have been mentioning. But Samantha, we're going to leave that conversation there. Again, Birds and Renewable Energy Project Manager Samantha Ralston-Paton talking about the impact of the Khi Solar One in the Northern Cape province.